Welcome to the Association for the Study of African American Life and History's 2023 Black History Month Festival Virtual Plus experience. This afternoon, we present our program, Poetry, Fighting with Words, Then and Now, featuring our host and moderator, Dr. Judy Moore Latta from Howard University, and our distinguished panelists, including Dr. Tony Medina, also from Howard University, Dr. Shauna M. Morgan from the University of Kentucky, and Frank X. Walker, also representing the University of Kentucky. Our program will be getting underway in a matter of moments, but first, the leadership team of ASALH would like to acknowledge our members, supporters, and our sponsors, without whom these and all of our programs would not be possible. And please be sure to go to our website for a complete list of programs that will be available all month long right here on ASALH TV. We will begin today's program with the singing of the Negro National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, as performed by the 105 Voices of History under the direction of Roland M. Carter.
We pray.
And now, your host and moderator for today's program, Dr. Judy Moore Latta.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Lift every voice and sing. You know, it's appropriate that a poem written 123 years ago has inspired us for generations. James Weldon Johnson, my fellow Floridian, wrote that, and his brother J. Rosamond Johnson set it to music. Hello, I'm Judy Moore Latta, Professor Emerita, Howard University. Thank you, Asala, for assembling this amazing, amazing festival. And thank you all for being here. Welcome to Asala Black History event, Poetry, Fighting with Words, Then and Now. And we hope today you will be encouraged, or you'll come away having a new appreciation for the words you speak and the ones you hear. You know, I call myself one of the grits, girls raised in the South. And even though I've traveled throughout the country and internationally and been a producer and reporter at media networks and stations and worked in communications for nearly 50 years and taught at Howard University for 35 years, it's what I learned from my roots growing up in the segregated South in Tallahassee, Florida, on the campus of Florida A&M University. It's what I learned there about words that really grounded me and gave me an appreciation and respect for them. On this day, I'll introduce you in just a few minutes to an extraordinary panel of poet scholars, artists, who are connected with their communities and their roots, and who know the history of our journey, and who are pushing to reinforce our humanity. And so today, they'll share poems, and we'll engage in a very rigorous roundtable discussion about where we've been, where we are, where we're going. And you'll have a chance also to participate as you participate with the Asala TV chat and Q&A. So if you have comments, you can put them in the chat. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A. But first, I'd like to share one of my original poems that will help to provide an overview for us. When I learned that Asala was, that the theme was resistance, I immediately thought of a couple of things. I said, when people think about Black resistance, is that a narrow definition or is it a broad one? And what really has been the role of poetry in what we consider resistance? And what difference has it made anyway? Well, with the help of a few of my friends, producer Tina Mansley and actor Gillian Macklin and researcher Rocky Jones, here's a part of how I grappled with those questions. So before our discussion today, I'd like to offer an historic overview, if you will, via this brief video. So I want you to watch More Than Resistance.
A poem, More Than Resistance. They may not have called them poems then, but words with fight and grit and courage worked their way into our souls, walked into our spirits, touching something deep that made us move and gave us strength. They may not have called them poems then, but words of creative flurry and original force sang their way into our hearts, sank into our guts and minds, and brought us wisdom to act in truth. On the wings of a word, our voices pushed, tight and turbulent, full and faithful, loving and lasting. Ready to smash spaces where Black folks have been denied and claim access to cities and nights and mountains and more. Then and now and into our future. Nothing can silence us, because our words are poems, and our poems are more than resistance.
Our words are poems, and our poems are more than resistance. I'd like to introduce you now to our amazing, prolific participants who will be in dialogue and in discussion. And in alphabetical order, let me introduce them. First, Dr. Tony Medina. We call him Medina. Poet, scholar, political satirist, author of some 21 books for adults and children, born in the South Bronx, graduate of Baruch College and later State University of New York, Binghamton, where he earned the master's and PhD degrees. He's recipient of numerous awards, including the Patterson Prize for Books for Young People, the Langston Hughes Society Award, and the African Voices Literary Award. Medina now teaches at Howard University, where he was named the first professor of creative writing. He's joined by Dr. Shauna M. Morgan. Shauna, poet, scholar, who is the author of The Penetrating Fear of Dogs and Other Animals. Her incredibly fascinating work is deeply engaged with the traditions of global Black art and culture. And she's currently working on a manuscript, The Life Thing in Us, Decoloniality and the Aesthetics of Liberation in Contemporary Black Poetry. Her critical writing and her poetry have been published in multiple journals, and she's been recognized widely for her enduring love for the diaspora, and especially for her home, Jamaica. Dr. Morgan Shauna is Associate Professor of Writing and Africana Literature at the University of Kentucky, where she also serves as the very dynamic Director of Equity and Inclusion in the Center for the Enhancement of Learning and Teaching. And our third panelist is Professor Frank X. Walker. Frank, native of Danville, Kentucky, multidisciplinary artist, I might tell you, the first African-American writer to be named Kentucky Poet Laureate. Frank has published 11 collections of poetry, including Turn Me Loose, The Unghosting of Medgar Evers, which was awarded an NAACP Image Award for Poetry, and the Black Caucus American Library Association Honor Award for Poetry, among so many other awards. He's adapted some of his poetry for the stage, and as a musician and visual artist and spoken word artist, he was voted one of the most creative professors in the South. Frank coined the term Afrolatia, and you'll hear more about that. And he co-founded the Afrolation Poets, who are proud to say that some of the bluegrass is Black. He's founding editor of Pluck, the Journal of Afrolation Arts and Culture, and Frank is professor of English and African American and Africana Studies, as well as director of the MFA in Creative Writing program at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. Welcome to all of you, welcome. So good to see you.
Thank you, Dr. Judy Moore Latta. Great to be here.
It is wonderful to see you. By way of introduction, I'm going to ask you to do what you do, to just do a poem that speaks to what we are talking about. Medina?
Thank you. I'll open. I was really inspired by your video, your poem, and I like to see that my work as a writer is sandwiched between what James Baldwin insists that a writer should be, should do, which is to bear witness, and also Ishmael Reed, who says writing is fighting. And with that, I want to start with this opening piece that is in two movements, one a short one and then a little longer. The first one is called Cannibals on U Street and is reminiscent of what happened with the brother in Memphis, Tennessee, who was brutalized by the police, Tyree Nichols. And the second one is about what happened to our brother in Baltimore, Freddie Gray. 1, Cannibals on U Street. Regardless of which nightstick hits you upside your head, it still cracks in 4/4 time. The streets still flow red. The gutter chokes on cherry blossoms. Rain splinters into kisses. Horses gallop out of horns, punching holes through smoky neon air. Death is a woman you mistook for a bass, stringing her along. Somewhere a bomb is dropping. Somewhere a baby is screaming. Somewhere your mama is dreaming. You'll come home. You'll come home. 2, from the crushed voice box of Freddie Gray. I am the magic Negro, the Black Houdini, who done it to himself. I handcuffed my own damn self. I threw myself in the back of the patrol car, my hands shackled behind my back, slave ship cargo ago. I am the magic Negro, the Black Houdini, who done it, does it to himself, him black self. See ma? No hands. I snatched the pistol from the white man's mind, from the back of the patrol car. Suck on this, Houdini. I grabbed the gun and shoot myself in the chest, neo-colonial style. The autopsy report says, damn, would have been easier to walk on water. I bet you a quarter he done shot himself. I am the magic Negro, spineless. I broke my own spine after hog-tying myself into a pretzel. Even Houdini, who done it with envy, only to turn myself into a human pinball, rallying around the steel gullet of a Negro pickup truck once reserved for newly arrived potato famine, New York Irish drunks down on their luck. Me, moi, it is I who was Othello. Oh, hell no, yes, me, the magic Negro, the black Houdini, who done it, does it all the time to himself, his own damned self. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you my former colleague at Howard University, the poet and scholar, Dr. Shauna Morgan.
Thank you so much, Medina, and thank you for those powerful, powerful, moving poems. I appreciate the echoes of our dear Amiri Baraka in there. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you to Dr. Latta, to Asala, and to all who have joined us. I'm going to share one poem. And I am sort of moving from something I once heard John Bracey say, and this was at a Furious Flower Poetry Convention. I think it was 2014. And he said, we look inside for ourselves. This is resume names. We gave them resume names. I had a different list and lingered on every letter, enunciating and singing each syllable, whispering at first, then shouting them, laughing them out, feeling the way they vibrated on my tongue and blew from my lips. Then I read each meaning, searched for a root, something free, anchored only by legacy and heritage, black and brown names, scented by bissap and masala, flavors to anoint tiny feet and wrinkled heads of dark hair, bundles wrapped in batik and kanga, mouths rooting at my breasts. I wanted names as dark as my areola and the insides of my mother's thighs, strong as an umbilical tug, sharp as the contractions that drew them out, determined as my will, more unyielding even than his last word. Thank you. I am pleased to welcome Professor Frank X. Walker, the inimitable historical poet.
Wow, you guys have set a really high bar this morning, afternoon, whichever it is in between. I'm going to share a poem that is, it's a mashup between Kentucky state song, My Old Kentucky Home, and a almost ubiquitous slave ad that can be traced to Lexington, Kentucky. And in Kentucky, when people hear the song, they either stand up and sing along and then cry at the end, or they don't get up at all. I'm part of that crowd who refuses to stand for the song. So this is called Why I Don't Stand. Oh, the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. $100 to $1,250 for Negroes. This summer, the darkies are gay. The undersigned wishes to purchase a large lot of Negroes. Well, corn tops ripe for the New Orleans market and the meadows in the bloom. I will pay $1,200 to $1,250 for number one young men and $850 to $1,000 for number one young women, while the birds make music all the day. In fact, I will pay more for likely Negroes. Weep no more, my lady. Oh, weep no more today than any trader in Kentucky. we sing one song. My office is adjoining the Broadway Hotel for my old Kentucky home. On Broadway, Lexington, Kentucky, for my old Kentucky home far away, where I or my agent can always be found. Thank you. Back to you, Judy.
Wow. That's all I can say. Wow. Oh, amazing. Listen, you all are touching on some important things about the sacred life of Black people. And so I'm just wondering if you can, how do you, I can tell you, I'm just kind of floored by these poems, even though I've seen and read the poems in places that I have your work here, and it's just incredible, it's wonderful. But hearing you do it, I wonder if you could just say a word about why that, what is the resistance there for you? How do you see resistance in your work?
Woo. I mean, just to go first, I was thinking about this when I was taking a shower this morning. And the thing is that I think as early as I could possibly think, I was writing poems that way. I mean, my first poems, of course, were, you know, about love and all that stuff and loneliness and despair. But as I got more into like reading people like James Baldwin as a teenager, and he taught me how to literally write sentences. And I got, as I developed and started reading more broadly and widely, I just had a lot to say. And I come from, you know, I come from the so-called hood. I come from the projects. I come from the South Bronx. And so we face racism, classism, all the isms you could think about on a daily basis. And I come from a fighting family and, you know, a block that was like at the birth of hip hop and stuff like that. So it's kind of ingrained in my psychology, and I don't know any other way not to write so-called resistance. But my view of what resistance or engaged or socially, you know, relevant political poetry has expanded, you know, because I think just our everyday lives, you know, are testament to bearing witness that we are human beings and we are here. So like writing about Black joy, you know, in my book, 13 Ways Looking at a Black Boy, my introduction is a long poem, just talking about Black boys doing what any boys would do in the world, you know, all the fun things, the sad things, the things that they have to grapple with. And so all of that falls under the umbrella. It just so happens that we are, as, you know, poets, as artists of color, saddled with the responsibility to, you know, bear witness and to speak out and to use our words to fight. I mean, if there were no Langston Hugheses or Zora Neale Hurstons, you know, we wouldn't be here. So by virtue of us being here, we are sparking off another generation to come with our words and our art.
And that actually kind of gets us into what we want to do today as we kind of go through this. We want to look back and we want to look forward too. I'm wondering, Shauna, what about you in terms of resistance?
Sure. Thank you so much. And I love what you said about wanting to look backward and also look forward. It reminds me of something that Robin D.G. Kelley said in that book, Freedom Dreams, right? About what poetry is and what poetry does, right? As a sort of tool for liberation and imagining. And what he says is that it transports us to another place. And I'm paraphrasing, right? It allows us to relive, right, the horrors and recognize that the history and even the sort of current state of that. But it also allows us to imagine, right, a possibility for a future, for something that isn't this. And for me, that's sort of what I look for, or what I'm sort of what comes out of me when I'm searching for a poem or engaging writing. And that can happen in a lot of different ways, like Medina says. The poem I opened with, resume names, right? It sort of acknowledges that there's this tension, between who we are and who people think we should be, but that there is something about us, our heritage and our legacy, that serves to define who we are, and we articulate that, right? Whether it is in art, visual art, or literature, but poetry has always been this way to express those things.
And this you mentioned this idea of remembering, kind of looking back, remembering and imagining going forward, and that's remembering and imagining, and yes, I think that really certainly comes forward. Frank, what about you? How do you see resistance in your work?
Well, I think for me, it's hard to even add to the brilliance that has already been spoken. But when I think about resistance and my source material, it's a little broader than literature and words. I think of myself as an artist activist, and my early activism came from music. I think about Marvin Gaye, I think about Curtis Mayfield, coming forward to even the last poets. Their activism and their commentary and their love for Black people have all been very influential, even before I get to the page, and had a chance to appreciate a Sonia Sanchez and a Amiri Baraka, and still recognize that same fire is there. And then to see it again on stage with, almost anything August Wilson produced and other playwrights, to understand that even if we're just dancing, like Alvin Ailey, that there's something powerful happening with Black artists who are also activists when they engage in the community and our history in that same way as source material, as inspirational spaces to use as touchstones. So I can go to any of those places when I'm looking for some fire or needing to be uplifted, to receive some healing even. But when I look backwards, I look in all those directions, including visual artists like Romare Bearden and Aaron Douglas. When I look forward, I think more about my students. I'd like to think that I'm raising another generation of artist activists. The things that I put in front of them to read, and the artists and poets who have shaped me, I hope that will also shape them too. And we have so many choices. It's always a hard thing to do, trying to narrow it down to enough to fit in a single semester.
Yeah.
But I know all my colleagues here have that challenge and revamp their syllabi every 6 months just to make room for the new voices that continue to show up on the scene.
Yeah. What's interesting is that each of you, that each other's work very well. I wonder what is it that you see in somebody else's work here that they may not see, or that they may have, that really speaks again to this urge to resist in a very large way?
Well, Shauna already said the easy answer. Medina has, I won't even call it Baraka's fire, but he has Baraka-esque fire. And, having heard Amiri Baraka read live and been in that space when he fills up the room with a kind of urgency and power that you can't help but be moved. It's reminiscent to something that happens in churches. He knows he has it. He might be humble and not claim it, but everybody recognizes that, at least this generation's fire is in the space of our Dr. Medina.
It's because we're little people have loud mouths.
I would add to that. I think one of the things I appreciate about Medina's work too, we can't forget the children's books, right? The poetry that lives in the world of those books when we're thinking about the future and thinking about, generations ahead. And I think that one of the unique things that I see in those books is just the way that they will engage a young person, right? Not just with the story, but with the sort of aesthetics of the poetry that come through in those children's books.
Medina, could you say something about the children's books and that audience, especially when we talk about this?
I'll say something first about Frank and Shauna. You know, they remind me of Larry Neal. Larry Neal had this saying, you know, visions of a liberated future, right? And that became a book, a posthumous book that came out about him, Visions of a Liberated Future, which is basically what you were getting at, Judy, early on. And Frank has this great dedication and sweep of excavating stuff from history and letting us see it in such a different way, and re-engaging these moments that are really, you know, important to our elevation, you know. So he's doing this archival, historian type work with the poetry. In Shauna, I admire her attention to the details that you find in people that are grounded in roots, you know, like in the Caribbean culture. But what I most admire is that they have a broad range of aesthetics, and you could see it reflected in their various poems. So they're not just one note poets, you know? So that's who I gravitate towards, poets that have a wide range of aesthetics, or like Gordon Parks said, a choice of weapons. In terms of my children's books, I think all of my children's books are really literally political. It's, you know, I was inspired kind of like by Langston, you know, because I always admired how Langston was able to do, he has a foot in both worlds, you know, him and Anna Bontemps, and of course with the work with Du Bois and Jesse Fawcett with Brownies and all that great children's literature at the time that was very needed and necessary, because the depiction of Black children was just diabolical, you know, in this country, and detrimental to our psychology. So they were the first to publish somebody like Langston. And Langston was always trying to do something with regard to children. Him and Bontemps conspired on many, many manuscripts, a lot of which got rejected or whatever, but they were way ahead of the curve. So I felt like I wanted to reach a younger audience. And I got kind of tired of my peers in New York who just wanted to be on the stage, you know? And I said, I need to talk to the younger generation. And I just love the fact that children's books, you have this portable, you know, art gallery of text and imagery merged together. And I wanted to do that. Yeah. So my first book is called Days, Shawn Days, which is about a kid from the projects like myself, who you only see like middle class kids usually in these stories. I didn't see any kids from the projects. I wanted to put him on the map and have him talk about his life. You know, Deshawn Days, the life of this kid named Deshawn. And I actually ran into some Deshawns in my journeys.
So this go ahead, Shauna.
I was just gonna say, and you're in the tradition, right? Think about the amount of children's books that Lucille Clifton had, for example, and Frank's new children's book, A is for Appalachia, you know, is coming out, and so y'all are in the tradition of poets, Black poets, you know, writers who are moving across genre, you know, across medium even.
Yes, and we're gonna get to those who are moving across, and I hope that we'll engage some more with that. But I want to kind of pick up on what you just said, Shauna, and ask Frank about not only this new book, but this whole coining of this thing. Sounds like it's more it's a cultural reality that is just amazing. And I wonder if you could talk about that and how you came to it, Afrolatia. Am I saying it right?
It depends what side of the mountain you're on. We say Appalachia back home.
Appalachia. So if you're on my side of the mountain, it's Afrolatia, but Okay, interesting. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the shortest version of it, without taking too much time, is that what Appalachia does is make room for people of color who live in the same space. Back in the early 90s, the dictionary itself defined Appalachians as white residents of the mountainous regions of Appalachia, exclusively white residents. And the question I asked myself was, well, what does that make everybody else who lives in the same space? How could you make this delineation and leave out people? So the word Appalachia is intended to be inclusive and to take care of everybody else left out of that original definition. And for us, it challenges mass media's notions of who lives in Appalachia, a area of the country that crosses 13 states, includes the cities of Birmingham and Pittsburgh, which immediately lets you know that it can't be an all-white space, because if you know anything about Birmingham and Pittsburgh, you know August Wilson, you know at least a 16th Street bombing, those 4 little girls. You may not even know that so much history and culture, the father of African-American history is from Appalachia, who is Afro-Latin, but you never hear Carter G. Woodson spoken of as an Appalachian or an Afro-Latin. You never hear about Nina Simone and Roberta Flack and Bill Withers, George Clinton being from this same region. When you consider all those names from the same region and put them next to, say, Snuffy Smith and all those caricatures from Beverly Hillbillies, it just doesn't hold up. And so all the word is trying to do is force people to redefine what they think about the region, who they think is there, who it belongs to, how historically it's always been diverse, but also acknowledge how mass media has slowly, convinced us that it is this small, narrow space, that we can throw away just so the people who have money, big co, can exploit the land, just like colonialism does everywhere in the world. Once you convince the world that there are throwaway people there, they don't seem to care as much about the land. But when you retell the story in that holistic way and you put all of our history and culture into it, it becomes a totally different space. And that's all the word is trying to do. We have a group of writers called the Appalachian Poets who've been active for over 30 years, have been trying to tell that story, making the invisible visible, to unmute muted voices. And our commitment to the region is also a commitment to Black people and the land. And we claim it, we say it loud and proud, and we're, I think that we'll go to our graves doing the same thing.
The bluegrass is also Black.
Some of the bluegrass is Black.
Okay, wonderful. All of you have made reference to shoulders on which you stand, and you've mentioned these names, and you talk about people who kind of come forward, who you've either seen in person or you've read or because of their work. I'm wondering if you can, as we broaden this out and look beyond that, if you can say some names that have to be said in this space. Now, having said that, let me just say, it's going to take 2 hours to say the names, everybody. But there are some pivotal people who've certainly influenced you, but also who have been important in doing the work that you have been describing. And I'm just wondering, kind of going back, if you could call those out and tell us something about them.
Let me jump in first. I'm going to say 2 organizational names that covers like 100 different names at the same time. I'm going to say Furious Flower and Joanne Gavin, Dr. Gavin, and Toy and Cornelius at Cave Canem. If we know those institutions, by default we get hundreds of amazing poets of color who are important and of every age. So I want to put those out there in lieu of any individual names.
Thank you.
I guess I'll just share two folks who who are like a daily meditation for me. One being June Jordan and Lucille Clifton. And I always say that Lucille Clifton has a poem for every day, for every moment. And even if you think that you're not a poetry person, Lucille Clifton has poems for you. And, everything about her work in the way that, she has this poem, it's just a few lines. Africa, home, oh home, the soul of your variety, all of my bones remember. And in just those few lines, she encapsulates so much, everything about who we are, our memory, our future, the variety. I mean, and so I would say, Lucille Clifton really is for me just a foundational figure.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take it. I don't know. I've just been fortunate enough to, how they say you should never, you should never meet your heroes. Well, I'm glad I met my heroes. I'll just say off the bat, I'll just roll off a couple of names that I had who personally helped me or inspired me. Dr. Eleanor Traylor at Howard University, who brought me here. This is like my 20th year. Amina Baraka, Sonia Sanchez, Luz Reyes Rivera, Jane Cortez, Ishmael Reed, Haki Madabuti, also known as Donnell Lee. I would say Sam Anderson. I would say, who am I leaving out? Ishmael Reed, just right off the bat. I could just be here naming names endlessly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So, and those are all powerful names. I'm wondering if you can tell us, and they will claim, one of the things that they say about their own work is that they stand on shoulders. And I'm just wondering, because sometimes we forget that this whole tradition is not a new tradition in the past 20, 30, 40 years. But that tradition is one that goes back so much further. It goes back further than the 20th century, than the 19th century, than the 18th century. And Shauna, I wonder if you could kind of help us with that.
Sure. I mean, if you think of written poetry, right? We're speaking of written poetry because, of course, we acknowledge that Black poetry in song and in so many ways has, existed for ages. But in this, what we consider the United States, North America now, you can go back to Lucy Terry, right? Phyllis Wheatley, Jupiter Hammond, right? So you go back to the 18th century, the 17th and 18th century, right? To see early works. But again, there is a long tradition. And I think that the names that we call now, right, that Medina calls, that, I have, and Frank, those names also recognize the tradition. And one of the interesting things is that you can find in the works of Lucille Clifton, right, references to the tradition, right? And so I think that, it's really important to recognize that we are not disconnected, right? Yeah.
Audre Lorde, Lucille Clifton, June Jordan, and Tasaki Shange. I was in Alice Walker. I was devouring these writers. Toni Morrison, I was devouring their works as I was just teaching myself how to write.
Teaching yourself how to write.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
And then one time Amiri gave a reading at this was downtown in the Village, I think. And he came off stage and said, "What's up, man? What's up?" He said, "What you been up to?" I said, I'm just trying to write these poems. I'm just trying to, he said, I hear that. Because, after you see somebody, like that read, you just like want to fold your stuff up and just like bounce and be like, all right, I'm finished. We can't do this. But you figure out that you can. I remember reading Pedro Pietri's Puerto Rican obituary for the first time. And this was like right after I came out the army, it was like trying to get into college. And I was like, oh man, I was so depressed. I said, I can't write like this. I was despondent, but yet it was a two-edged sword. You know, you get like, wow, this is like too much, but then you get inspired, you know. And I did, then some years later, I do a reading and Pedro's there, and I read this poem that I wrote literally that day, that morning in the shower, called "Capitalism is a Brutal MF." And after I read that poem, I get off the stage and Pedro's there with his arms wide open and said, "Hey, where have you been? We've been waiting for you." So, you know, you see that like full circle moment happening with your heroes, you know.
And we want to talk a little bit more about the heroes and stuff, but I want to also remind folks that they can participate in the conversation. If you have comments, you may put them in the chat. If you have questions, please, by all means, put them in the Q&A, and we will try to get to those. So, talking about heroes and the like, can you say something about how that Shauna, you mentioned this, that you kind of, it's a daily ritual for you. I'm just wondering how the resistance that you read in the work that you see, how that inspires you as you go forward. And resistance, not necessarily in the traditional narrow way, but resistance in the broad way that all of you do. I mean, and you're doing resistance not like this, but you're doing resistance like this, as I see it. I'm just wondering if you can talk about that.
Sure. My former colleague at Howard, Medina's colleague, the author of a new book of Black Study, Dr. Joshua Myers, talks about the poetics of liberation. And he said that, it's not a direction, it's not a destination, but it is a way of life. It's a way of being. It's a way of being, right? And so when you think about resistance, when you think about liberation, right, it's a way that you occupy the world on a day-to-day basis in everything that you do, whether you're going from a classroom or you're reading poetry or writing or going to students. And so I look to folks who came before me, like Clifton, like June Jordan, right? And even folks who are writing today. There are folks who are writing today who are in this tradition of liberation, right? And so for me, I think we live we're experiencing a time, right, that we can sort of succumb to despair very, very easily, right? And I think that for me, going to these writers, these poets, right? Because that, Ngugi wa Thiong'o talked about the creative imagination, right, as a mode for liberation, right, and freedom. So going to a creative space, whether I'm writing or reading, for me is a necessary way to occupy, to thrive. And for me too, music. Frank talked about music earlier. I think music is a big part of that, and I think we have to recognize too that these artists aren't living in silos. In the past they didn't, right? They engaged with each other, whether it was Aaron Douglas and Langston Hughes, or writers today. So for me it's a way, it's an orientation, as Myers says.
Frank, could you build on that? Because this whole idea of the music as being so much a part of this, and Shauna, you make a wonderful point about not living in isolation, and that all of this is the way you occupy space, the way you walk in the world, and there isn't a separation in what we are hearing between the way you walk in the world and the way you work in the world, and the way you connect with community, that kind of thing. Frank, I'm just wondering if that sparks any.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, it makes me think immediately about when I look at the word community, when those Black artists and activists across all genres, are working and living in a healthy community, it gets a name. I mean, look at the Harlem Renaissance. Look at the Black arts movement. Each of those movements were only as healthy as they were because of the kind of multi-layered contributions, not from one segment of our community, but the artists, the musicians, the activists were all in the same places, listening to the same jazz music and having the same post-concert conversations and enjoying each other's company and bouncing ideas off of each other. At some point in the future, what we're living in now is going to get a name. I think there's so much activity happening nationally for Black artists, particularly Black poets that I'm familiar with, that sometimes I feel like we're in I don't know if it's the middle, the beginning, the end of another kind of renaissance. But I think if you consider community in its grandest scale, Shauna can best speak to this, and it's the thing I wanted to say about her work when we first opened, is that, her work makes me think about who we are in the diaspora, that we are not, we're not just writing poems about Kentucky, that, there are reflections of us everywhere in the world, everywhere there's something happening that's exciting, we're proud of it. Look at what hip hop has become. It's a global stage now. And it started in the South Bronx, and now it belongs to the world. And I think all of our highest art forms from multiple generations, the names I would have added would have started with, Paul Laurence Dunbar and come forward to a Margaret Walker and include Gwendolyn Brooks. I mean, those multi-generational important names to me that are still so important that I return to them regularly. Even in my own writing today, I'm looking at Paul Laurence Dunbar. I'm looking at what Gwendolyn Brooks has done. I'm looking at Margaret Walker, For My People. I'm still trying to write my own For My People poem because she did it so well. She did it so lovingly. And it was such an inclusive, broad-minded understanding of who we are as Black people and how to best use our most creative selves to be part of our growth and legacy and survival.
Yeah, we want to just kind of start preparing to kind of hear some more from you individually in terms of your work. But I would, Frank, in your work, you've talked about the new Zoras and the new Langstons, those who are coming. I wonder if you could just say a quick word about who some of those are and where they are.
They're everywhere. They're in our classrooms. They're always in our classrooms, and they're busboys and poets. I mean, I don't think there's a place in the world where these new voices don't exist. I think the reason these amazing voices show up at inaugurations is because you can almost throw a rock anywhere in the world to hit a poet. Not that there are too many of us, but the ones that are actually saying something in the space with all this new media that gives it kind of an immediacy and availability to the world has really changed the game, I think.
And I think that there are emerging and established contemporary writers who, aren't on television or there's no camera before them, but they're doing some really, amazing things. Right now I'm reading Alexis Pauline Gumbs, brilliant. I am getting ready to pick up Enzo Surin's American Scapegoat. There are so many writers.
To mention, it's easier for poets to get published these days, and you can publish yourself directly on social media, which is really inspiring.
Absolutely. Well, this certainly speaks to this continuum that exists and that is continuing to extend. And so I think one way of kind of pulling all this together is for us to hear some more from you. So I'm going to invite you each to just kind of share some things in terms of your work and what we've been talking about, or however you'd like to do it, for just a brief time, just a brief time. And then we'll go from there, but we want to hear from each one of you. We're going to start, Medina, with you, then we'll go to Shauna, and then we'll go to Frank. And then, of course, I invite our listeners and our viewers to put questions in the Q&A. Okay, thank you. Medina, it's all yours.
All righty. Well, I am going to read two pieces to close out. The first piece I wrote while we were in the grips of two pandemics, one that was set upon us about 3.5 years ago, the coronavirus, and one that's been ongoing since, I guess, the advent of slavery in this country, police brutality. And, we were in the middle of the marches taking place after George Floyd was killed, and also trying to live under lockdown while Trump was still in office, being a menace. This is called In Venice, Dolphins Swim the Canals, because while the world was on lockdown, nature was getting a respite from our nastiness, let's say, right? So the canals of Venice were so clear that you could see dolphins swimming. In Venice, dolphins swim the canals as LA skies are crystal ball clear, predicting the coming of the cicadas. In DC's cherry blossoms opening early, like parasol debutante umbrellas. The streets are empty. Everyone is sheltered in as a virus rages like Ralph Ellison, invisible to the naked eye, while a naked ape, an orange idiot, Sans the Savant, is babbling about it being a hoax, it's all a hoax, telling us from the White House, don't believe your lying eyes, as refrigerated trucks in Brooklyn stockpile bodies in freezers like popsicles. This Agent Orange menace is a virus unto himself, as racism is, as stupidity is. In a country where Confederate statues are more visible than common sense, a virus named after cheap piss water beer, this menace, China, as if repulsed by his wife's vagina. At a press conference, he bogarts the mic from the experts who know more about science than he knows about stealing, telling us hydroxychloroquine malaria pills are good as Tic Tacs at fighting bad breath. He should know. And if that doesn't work, you could spray down your tongue with Lysol or belt back some Clorox to crank your box. In Venice, dolphins swim the canals free of debris, while here Black joggers are hunted by fathers and sons in a rite of passage Jim Crow outdoor trailer trash parlor game, as Amy or Karen or Becky with the bad brains scream hysterically into cell phones at 911 operators in their worst Stanislavski method acting like the black birder is a mockingbird, while an essential worker EMT cannot get any PPE. Instead, she got 8 bullets into her bone-tired sleeping body in a 21-gun salute to T.S. Eliot with a side of side eye, because May is the cruelest month, especially during a lockdown where racism and hate are never quarantined. Yet a Black man remains a stepping stool for a white man's knee, who drummed out Colin Kaepernick as if a flag takes precedence over a Black life. In the last piece, I want to dedicate this piece to my main man, Langston Hughes, whose birthday kicks off Black History Month, and also for the Asala family. It's called I've Got the COVID Blues. I've got the COVID blues, hazmat outfit to read the news. I got that damn viral blues. Mystifying, perspiring, invisible shit blowing through the wind like yesterday's news blues. I can't think, breathe, or snooze. I got the rumble, rumble, chest rattly bubble gut blues. I've been sanitized, ostracized, hydrogen peroxide, cleaner than hospital sheet blues. My tears are sterilized. My fears capsized, spilling over my broke bedtime blues. So much so I'm afraid to read the news. I got the COVID-19 stockpile body bag blues, them refrigerator truck blues, them Roto-Rooter blues, them hack and wheeze, double sneeze, Vicks, vapor rub, Robitussin, preparation H, body ache, earthquake, ha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha blues. I've got them we wear the mask blues, them hand sanitizer, hydroxychloroquine booze blues, them broke heel hole in the soul blues, squeaky wheel lungs like shredded wheat blues. I got them locked down, shut down, god awful blues, them loveless, touchless, cold sheet blues. I got it real bad, them blues. My head is heavy as a brick. I can't sleep. I'm scared to get sick. I'm so paranoid, I can't stop my eye twitch. Wake up in a hyperventilating sweat blues. I got some Hail Mary full of grace garlic string around my neck. Get thee behind me, Satan blues. Them TB smallpox blanket, diphtheria, typhoid, Mary, love in a time of cholera blues. Them Bruegel, triumph of death, black lungs matter, black Orpheus, peach snop, Dr. Snabel, Von Ram, beak nose, bleary eye, cloak and swagger, death with occasional smiling blues. I got some backwater, fever swamp, Florida water, Espiritu Santos, Tuskegee. What had happened was anti-vax, death be not proud, snot nose, sit and shiver, novena, reincarnation, take it all back, blues.
Yes. Thank you, Medina. Sister Shauna Morgan.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, so glad to be here in this space with you all. I'm just going to read one poem. And I'll first say that my work, there's something that the brilliant writer Kwame Dawes once said that is very much a part of how I do my work. He said, everything I do, everything I write is through the prism, the filter and prism of history, of Africa, of diaspora. And that's the same for me. And I'm also deeply interested in the natural world and agriculture and Black life in nature and in agriculture. And so this poem sort of touches on that, our connection to the earth. This is Ground Life in memory of Breonna Taylor. It has an epigraph. In this here place, we flesh that weeps and laughs, flesh that dances on bare feet in grass. Love it hard. Yonder, they do not love your flesh. And that's from Toni Morrison's Beloved. That's Baby Silks in the Clearing. This is a poem in 3 parts. 1, essential. Working hands brown, reach for our wrists, quiet, pulsing, essential, hush, the sound of flesh, a music corporeal, the body singing, a life, a harmonizing of blood, a trembling. Let us make a place, a provision ground to grow what we can imagine, our bodies in rhyme, the thud of hoe and axe, searching the earth for a place to seed ourselves, root a heart. Breezy, Brianna, deeply loved flesh, a heart, a prize, hands and smile, a mouth for our weeping, for our laughing, ground life shuddering on every street. Let us make a place. Wangalo Wale. 2, all the names we call you, Brianna, all the names you are, we call you. The sorrow songs forever syncopating our pain, breaking free, forcing us to improvise a world without you. We take only our hands to the provision ground. Our toiling a backbeat, we clap and shout, we clap and wail, we clap and dig, we clap and harvest, pulling up the sustenance in your name again. Your mama offers her hands and voice, tells us you are everybody's sister, everybody's daughter, a healer, loving our people well, life grounding, touching freedom's floor. Wangalo. Wale. 3. The offspring of loss has made a home in our bodies. Our fists clutch, veins push forth, inside a plangent song, quaking to the ground beneath us, holding every memory of our brie. We have augured a place deeper inside, spirit watering the seeds of memory and peace, the roots of fight and freedom. Go there, love it hard. Brianna Wale. Thank you.
Another wow. Wow, thank you. Brother Frank.
Yeah, I second that. Wow, such a beautiful voice and rendering. I'm gonna read 2 poems from my current historical obsession, which is the Civil War in Kentucky, specifically antebellum, the actual war, and what happened after the Civil War, especially the pushback that occurred because of this new freedom. There's so much about this period that's been untold, and it's not in the history books. So I'm hoping these poems will be shared and read widely. But this first poem is about a mutiny that took place. I can imagine the situation where all the officers in Kentucky were also slave owners, and they were in charge of all these new Black soldiers. Kentucky contributed the 2nd largest number of Black troops in the country, only behind Louisiana, 24,000 plus. So this first poem, Mutiny. Mutiny is just a fancy word white officers use when they bark, roll over, nigga, or sit up and beg, boy, and we don't. They've been the master them whole lives and believe obey come natural to colored men. But some of us was already free. Some of us could already spell our own name. And some of us just have a hard time being talked down at like we dirt under somebody else's boot. Most colored men done mutinied with our eyes and in our hearts so many times since we joined this fight for freedom. It's a wonder our blues ain't dark gray. We sleep with death every night, knowing Johnny Reb gonna kill us if they catch us in these colors, whether we lay down our arms or not. Rolling our eyes, sucking our teeth, and not biting our tongues is just fleas on a rabid dog, not the giant head foaming at the mouth, and certainly not the fangs. The second one I'll share is Kentucky related. We all know the amazing Paul Laurence Dunbar, but most people don't know that Paul Laurence Dunbar's father was enslaved in Kentucky and escaped and ended up joining the Union Army. So I want to read a poem that folds in Paul Laurence Dunbar's mother, Matilda Dunbar. So this is called A Golden Shovel for Matilda Dunbar. And the poem you probably won't hear that is raised up as in tribute as one of Dunbar's own poems. And you know, if you look at the golden shovel and look down the right side, it says, "We were the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes." That's in the poem, but you won't hear that. This is Golden Shovel for Matilda Dunbar in the voice of Paul Laurence Dunbar. I wish, but I can't say there was ever such thing as a we. I know Papa wore a soldier's uniform, longer than he would wear the mantle of husband or father? Who could know which of the horrors, slavery in Kentucky or war, would break him, make him mask himself, refuse the generosity and love you had to offer, that you poured generously onto me? A childhood filled with grins was part of my reward, though marked with his absence and his unkindness towards you. He left me with only the half lies about his exploits during battle. When he recalled and told it, he tried to disguise all the pain, sorrow, and grief that hides beneath even the most musical of tongues, deep up under our laughter. You always wanted to see joy in my eyes and cheeks, or a book in my hand. You smiled at my fatherless dreams and reminded me to listen to how the music in his stories shades and protects and spreads joy on his listeners, always making our sad father, our gallant colored soldier, more heroic in my eyes. Thank you. Back to you, Judy.
Yeah, you're capturing some amazing kinds of things. Amazing. So if all of you could just come back on for just a second. As you were reading and as you were sharing, I actually kind of got a few messages and things, and people were kind of responding in some very rooted ways. I do want to acknowledge that there is a class listening to you, a music class at Florida A&M University. The Professor Darrell Tooks is actually, he says that his class in Afro-American music was actually just closing out, but I had gotten a couple of comments from them and from others too. I wonder, because sometimes people think poets are just an exclusive group. But one of the things that's very clear from everything that you've said and everything that you've written and done is that you are in community. And I'm wondering if you can say something to those who are listening about being in community and being connected with others in terms of how then you express yourself. And kind of helping to dismiss this notion that poetry for Black people has always been something exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are innumerable examples, right? From, Medina's mentor, Baraka, when you think about Baraka and music, to, June Jordan, who was literally with community of people, right, doing things. And I would say that, there is, first of all, poetry in everything, right? In the okra that filled up my backyard last summer, in the memories that come out of that, out of me tilling the earth and reaching back for my ancestors, right? And the history that's also tied to that. And so I guess I'm sharing that to say that, this, again, there is a thread of connection. There is a tradition, right? And a lineage that's connected. And so if, when I am writing, I'm listening to Liz Wright or Sarah Elizabeth Charles or Robert Glasper or Miles or Charlie Parker or whoever. I mean, there's a connection there. There's a tradition of people interacting with each other and sharing work. And we rest very much on that, right? Whether you're a historian or, a poet or a musician. And it's just a matter of finding it, reaching it, right? Seeing the connections there.
When my Aunt Josie passed, on my way over there to the Bronx, to where the wake was, I came late because my car broke down because, some craziness happened on the highway. And so when I got there, it was the end of the wake. and the entire parking lot was packed with people. 90% of which were from the projects, the Rosnick housing projects. And I was like, man, what the hell? You would think that she was like a big time celebrity or something, right? But that was the where I come from, you know, how people are so dedicated to one another. And when you grow up in that environment, you know, you grow up in, you're surrounded by stories in the kitchen, right? You're surrounded by, you know, having to do the dozens and use words to fight, right? So that's all ingrained in us from the beginning. And of course, like Frank pointed out, the music is always there pumping. So it's in the family, it's in the neighborhood, it's in everything that you do. And from my aunt to, you know, who was just a regular everyday person that lived in the projects and stuff, and all these people showed up for her.
Mm.
I mean, that just shows you that, you know, it doesn't matter how many degrees you get and whatever, you are who you are and where you come from, always. And you should never forget that.
We have a number of questions that we're not going to be able to get to, but I do want to just ask you, there is one question that came from Effie Smith Macklin, and she asks, is there a particular time of day or night that you find better for creating and writing your poetry?
Yeah, I'll try to answer that as briefly as possible. I think it depends on, most poets I know, their regular life sometimes comes in conflict when they're most creative. I'm a morning person. I wake up in the morning with stuff already rushing to get to the page. But after 10 o'clock at night, I'm useless. I could barely read a poem after 10 o'clock at night because my brain is so full and cluttered by that point in the day. But yes, absolutely. For me, morning is the best time because it's quieter. I've had a chance to rest my brain and my body and my mind. And usually, if I'm lucky, I've also had a chance to dream about some things and to work out some stuff in my subconscious that may have puzzled me the day before. All that stuff collectively gives me the best potential harvest when I try to go to the page.
Okay, anyone else?
Shauna?
For me, it's not that pointed and precise. I'm sort of erratic and just grab poems whenever they come.
Yeah, I'm best in movements, you know, like on trains and buses, airplanes, airports.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Another question has come from Brenda, and I hope I say this, Agahoa. And the question is about the Black Writers Conference and whether or not anyone might be able to speak to the mentoring relationship between Gwendolyn Brooks and Hakeem Madhubuti and the importance of such mentoring.
Ooh.
Is that a question to a specific conference? I guess I'm assuming the one at Chicago State, the Gwendolyn Brooks Conference, where Hakeem Madhubuti was a member of the faculty before he moved on. I think he's at DePaul now. But Third World Press, Gwendolyn Brooks, Chicago State, icons in that part of the world. You know, this is the same part of the world that produced, you know, Patricia Smith. I mean, you can't, you know, really disconnect any of those entities from each other. But I think everything they would point to regarding mentorship is real, and you can see it in the work, you can see it in the relationships. There's so many poets, you know, from what I consider the South, anything south of Chicago, including Kentucky, who even have relationships with Chicago because of our colleagues who may have been at University of Kentucky once, Kelly Norman Ellis, and moved on and then brought her kindred folks with her, you know, because of Kelly's movement to Chicago State University. Myself and most of the Afro-Latin poets had a chance to present in Chicago, and including at Northwestern, you know, where we have even more colleagues. So I think that mentorship, the community that happens not just at conferences, but any large opportunity to, you think about the people who've come together because of a funeral. James Baldwin's funeral produced a whole writing group. But I'll stop there. There's so much to say about it.
But it's interesting that you mentioned that, because sometimes we think that mentoring relationships have to happen in specific places. And that's not necessarily true. I mean, I think about so many times when I've been in a place and heard somebody do something, and just kind of, it's been in a church, in a living room, in a just whatever, in a classroom, and it's been an experience. So there's that connection that we have because of who we are. I mean, we just do this. And Medina, you were talking about your aunt and the power. I mean, sitting around her kitchen table. There's a mentoring that can happen any place.
Judy, the thing is, real quick, there is no generation gap with regard to the Black literary tradition. It's Russian nesting dolls. We all come out of one another. It's endless. It's constant. And we're not just in one part of the world. We're all over the globe. So with Haki and Gwendolyn Brooks, it was that Gwendolyn Brooks chose to politically side with a younger generation to make her statements. And it was a mutual, sharing of ideas. And also, sometimes you might have to turn your back on the establishment in order to help your people and help the Black press and things of that nature.
Yeah. As you say that, I mean, I think about the first time I met Amiri Baraka actually was in his living room at his home. And the people who were there, this was like 50 years ago, but the people who were there just kind of lived out what you just said. They were of all kind of ages, and there were young folks, and there were children, and there were mature people, there were seniors, and it all was an experience that was shared. So I appreciate that very much. Yeah. Well, this has just been absolutely amazing, and we could go on. And I do want to say that each one of you, in your own way, not only in sharing your thoughts and your experiences and your work, but also sharing yourselves. In doing that, you have provided an example of how we might, as we go forward, continue to do it. So thank you so very much. Oh, wow.
Thank you.
I know we're coming to the end of our time, and I just want to say that there are always more questions than there are answers. And we appreciate those of you who have joined, who have questions, and we apologize if we didn't get to your questions, but we encourage you to do the work to search for answers and to look for answers, because there are answers, but there are more questions. Now, I also encourage you to look in the chat to see the social media contacts for this dynamic panel of folks, so that you will know about how to be in touch with them, but also about their publications and all of that. So thank you so very much to all of you, to Sister Shauna Morgan, to Brother Tony Medina, to Brother Frank Walker. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We've been reminded, as we close here, we've been reminded that fighting with words includes pushing back against myths and popular assumptions. And that resistance does not simply center on oppression, but it's not just simply something against something, but it means advocating for dignity and self-determination. and naming oneself. And we've been reminded of one important thing that's radical about Black resistance, I think, and that is that we don't resist alone, but we resist in community. And we've also, during this time, been reminded of something else that's important about poetry and resistance, and that poetry has been, is, and promises to be an instrument, really, of the divine, grounded in the humane, but an instrument of the divine. And we've been reminded of so many other things that poetry urges us to pass it on. So we want to thank again our poets, scholars who have pushed us to appreciate poetry in new ways and to understand the tradition, the very rich tradition. Again, Dr. Tony Medina, Dr. Shauna M. Morgan, Professor Frank X. Walker. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have tingled our imaginations and taught us to think in some new ways, and we appreciate it. You've showed us that remembering is really the first step to resisting. So we appreciate that. And I don't know about you, those of you who are here as a part of the audience, but I don't know about you, but I am really glad to be surrounded by artists who help me recognize my own dignity. And so I appreciate that. Now, in closing, I'd just like to say that I do remember something. And this actually happened nearly 6 decades ago. My high school English teacher, Mrs. Dolores McGee, I remember so well. Mrs. McGee introduced me to Black poets. And one of the things that she said in her introduction to Black poets, she explained that their poems captured moments and places and hidden narratives and emotions and journeys and points of view. But the most important job of the poet, she said, was to find the sharp edge of truth. The sharp edge of truth that somebody wanted to tell, but few had the courage to say. And I've never forgotten that. That's what the poet does. Looks for the sharp edge of truth that somebody wants to say, but few have the courage to say aloud. The poet Amanda Gorman, many decades later, put it this way. And she says, "There is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if we're only brave enough to be it, if only we are brave enough to be it." Once again, I want to thank you all for joining us and for being here. I hope you've gotten some food for thought. And now, please listen to Poetry and Song, the musical rendition of Imagine, performed by the Prairie View A&M Chamber Singers.
Thank you for joining us for our program, Poetry, Fighting with Words, Then and Now. Please be sure to join us for our upcoming programs that will be continuing throughout the month of February. On Wednesday, February the 15th, PBS Books presents its second Books Author Talk featuring New York Times reporter Jonathan Abrams in conversation with Angel Ito. This program will be going live from 8 p.m. Eastern on Asala TV. On Thursday, February 16th, Asala will present the Carter G. Woodson Home Grand Reopening Preview Program. This program will start at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Asala TV. On Sunday, February 19th, Asala presents Preserving Black Resistance. This program begins at 5 p.m. Eastern on Asala TV. And on Tuesday, February the 21st, Asala presents the 2023 Annual Book Prize event. This program will kick off at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Asala TV. And don't miss the Black History Month marquee event on Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023, featuring the Secretary for the Smithsonian, Lonnie Bunch III. Access packages are $150 for gold access, $125 for silver access, and $65 for general access. Registration is required. Please go to our website at asalh.org for more information. And on Thursday, February the 23rd, ASALH presents Resistance and the Black Press. This event will start at 7 o'clock Eastern on ASALH TV. And on Saturday, February 25th, 2023, ASALH co-sponsors The Chisholm Effect, an in-person play at the Arc Theater. Tickets are available for $150 for orchestra seating and reception, and $75 for general admission. Purchase your tickets today at asalh.org or by calling 202-238-5912. And on Monday, February 27th, ASALH presents the final installment of the virtual Arthur Book Talks, beginning at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on ASALH TV. And on Tuesday, February the 28th, ASALH will conclude its month-long programs with our festival closing program, starting at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on ASALH TV. We would also like to thank our sponsors who have made this festival possible with their generous support and financial contributions. First, we would like to thank our legacy sponsors and our History Maker sponsors, our preservation sponsors, and our media sponsors. Without your help and support, this event would not be possible. If you would like more information on how to be a sponsor or a member of ASALH, please go to our website at www.asalh.org to learn more about how you can become a part of History in the Making with ASALH. Or you can contact our offices at 202-238-5912. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications bell for our YouTube channel, ASALH TV, so you can be alerted to all of our programming when we go live. You can also follow us on our social media platforms via Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for the latest information pertaining to all of our virtual events for 2023. We look forward to seeing you at our next event right here on ASALH TV. And now, to close out our program, the Prairie View A&M University Choir performing a rendition of the John Lennon classic, Imagine.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Ooh.
Imagine there's no country. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one.
Imagine no profession, I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the